Hi guys, and welcome to this tutorial. I'm going to walk you through what I did here with my image of Rose. When I first start out with any image, I start adjusting with Camera Raw, and I will open that by pressing Shift on the Camera Raw image. So I'm going to open it up here, and I'm going to make some adjustments. I'm going to bring down the I'm going to bring up the shadows, take down the highlights, and just kind of look at what I have in this raw file. The raw file has tons and tons of information in it that I want to be able to use. Bring up the whites just until I get that kind of like shine, that really nice kind of vibrance to the skin, and then I'm going to click OK. Now you'll notice that whenever I'm working with my raw files, I'm going to create one that's a smart object and another one that is a flattened version of the image, so that I can play with one and the other one doesn't change. If you just make a copy of your smart object, then you're going to end up with the same a clone of the smart object. So it's just going to make a repeated version. So I like to just go in and kind of start playing around with different things, primarily here in this first panel. So I'm going to do another version of the image where I bring up the highlights and bring up the blacks and maybe bring up the play with all the different knobs here, like the clarity, and just see what I get. And I'm never sure when I'm beginning what my image is going to look like when I end. I just kind of go through and keep tweaking and adding more and more different versions of the raw file. So I'm going to go real quick in here and use some of my presets. I highly recommend getting different presets just to give you some different options and to look at what, different ways that the image can very quickly go in different directions and see what works for you. I have my own presets that have come over time. You can just buy presets if you want to. I highly recommend you can get Lightroom presets and then import them into Camera Raw. But I'm just going to go in, and I've got a few favorites here that I do a lot. I'm going to do this backwards one real quick, which is going to push everything to the opposite side. So I'm bringing all the shadows up and creating kind of an HDR image that I'm going to use. I'm going to make 2 copies of that and put it in a group, and then put one on soft light and bring them all down to 50. I'm going to move very fast with this because this is kind of, you get kind of stuck if you do this really, really slow. So I'm doing this all kind of fast. So I'm going to go in and look at all the different versions of the raw file that I created and just slowly bring them up and see what I like, which ones are adding something to the image. So I'm just going to go through each one of these and see if it's actually adding something to the image or making it worse. And then I'm going to take these images where I kind of went backwards. One is normal and one of them is soft light, and I'm just going to see if that gives me more detail in the shadows and everything. And now I'll make a copy of that. And what I like to do is kind of go back and do this whole thing again, where I'll look at all my different images and I'll take that image that was the final image and I'll start bringing it underneath all the other images that I had before and adjusting it again, so I get a second version of my image with different choices. So I'm just going back and adjusting each one of these. I'm taking the final image that I have and then I'm dragging it under the layer that was above it or below it, and just kind of readjusting and seeing if I like the decisions that I made. And then I'll have 2 different options that I can use for my basic base image for where I'm starting from. So you can see I'm dragging up and down, seeing at what point, at what area I like the image I edited versus the different versions I got out of the raw file. So now I'm going to see in between those 2 images, final images, I'm about halfway through, half opacity between 2 of them. So I mix those together and create my my beginning image, really. So one of the first things I'm going to do is kind of bring up these freckles. So I do that by creating a black and white layer, and I'm going to change that to, there's two different ways that I really like to play with the freckles. One is with the black and white, and you basically would like just lower your red down. And the other one is here with the channel mixer. And the channel mixer is something that I didn't use for a really long time. But I really kind of like the results. You can kind of use different things like selective color and other tools to really play with your color mix. But I sometimes like the results I get from this. I'm not sure exactly if it's going to work or not. But what I'm going to end up doing is changing my blend mode to linear light in just a second. But I'm going to go back to black and white, and I'm just going to paint over the freckles now. And I'm also going to just make sure that I'm painting. This is just using the black and white layer. I'm going to paint over the areas where the freckles are to really enhance them. So you can see here I'm painting with a flow of about what is that, 3? Yeah. I'm recording this audio after I did the edit because I didn't record audio, so if it sounds a little strange, I'm just kind of watching myself edit here and trying to see what I did. Unfortunately, the audio didn't record on this when I was, even though I did record all the instructions, so I'm just watching myself. And here I'm you know, with the black and white adjustment layer, I'm just painting on top of her freckles and bringing them out. And so, like I said, you accomplish this by putting the blending mode in luminosity and bringing down the red, making the red darker, and then you'll see that reflected on the image. And the luminosity is just changing the luminosity. It's not changing the color information, so it's just making those areas darker. Then I just copy that layer mask to the color mixer. And I didn't really like how this was turning out. So what I ended up doing was changing this to luminosity too. So I wasn't going to affect the colors. I was just affecting, you know, you can see I start over here and start playing with it to see if I can make the reds darker. And I didn't quite get it right at first, and then when I put it on luminosity, I think at this point I was getting frustrated. So here we go, luminosity, and then boom, that changed it just a little bit. It just enhanced the freckles just a little bit. There we go. So bringing down the reds really brings down those freckles. It makes them more, makes them stand out more. Okay, so that is what I did basically to bring out the freckles, just the black and white and the image mixer. I did Shift Control Alt E to combine everything together, and now let's see what I'm going to work on now. All right, I believe I'm going to work on my eyes now. So what I do is put soft light, and then I go Control L and bring up that layer until the eyes really just start to pop. So you can see now that everything is way overexposed, but the nice thing about putting soft light at the very top is that it keeps all of the black areas dark. And so, especially in the eyes, it's very helpful to have that, so you don't, you know, it's better than dodging and burning, because dodging and burning will make everything lighter. But in this case, just the irises are lighter, so all I have to do is create a, I hit Alt or Option, and then on the mask, and create a black mask. And here is just painting in with you know, a very low flow, just painting in the parts of the eye. And you can also paint in little highlights and things like that, because it's going to be basically just making a lighter version of the image. In some ways this works better than dodging and burning, because even on the face you're still going to have the dark parts of the image. It's not just going to lighten everything. So I'm going to paint over the iris here, and and it's just going to make it pop a little bit. And you can always tell when somebody has taken some time with the eyes. What you always want to make sure of is that your eyes have a lot of nice contrast to them. So from the top of the eye into the whites of the eyes, you want to have contrast. And then the black and white and black and white. Putting two contrasty things kind of beside each other is what creates that contrast. It's kind of an illusion. And that's what you see in a lot of these images where the eyes just really pop, is that they've focused on creating a lot of contrast in the eyes between the pupil and the iris and the little black line that goes around the iris. Okay. So what am I doing now? Okay, it looks like I'm going to do frequency separation. And I remember I had a few issues here. I clicked on my action a couple of times and I messed it up. But the important thing of frequency separation, when I was looking at this image, what I thought was really interesting about it was that you have, you know, always as retouchers, we're trying to fix the skin. So when you have skin that's just completely full of freckles, what do you do? You know, how do you retouch that? How do you decide what's a freckle and what's a blemish and what's a, what do you want to keep? What do you want to get rid of? So what I decided was I was going to create a frequency separation where the bottom tone was basically completely clean. So there's nothing on the bottom part. And then on the top part, the texture part, was where I was going to have all the freckles, and to see if that would work. So here I am just screwing around a little bit. I did actually just tape what I was doing, so I didn't cut anything out, even the mistakes. You know, I try things and they don't work sometimes, and I'll put images on top of each other that, you know, I'll spend maybe 5 minutes trying something that doesn't work, and then I'll just delete it, you know. And you have to be willing to walk away from things sometimes when you're just not happy with it, you know, even if you did work at it. So I really, on the bottom tone, I really boosted it up a lot, I think to about 15, so that I completely blasted away those freckles on her face in the frequency separation. And this is just my my action for frequency separation. So this is the blur part, and it's going to automatically put the texture on top based upon what my blur was with apply image. Obviously, if you don't know about frequency separation, I would recommend just going and finding that somewhere. It's all over YouTube and actions as well. So this is my tone layer. What I'm going to do is just start selecting areas of the tone and blurring it. So I'm just going Gaussian blur, and I'm using the same number of Gaussian blur that I used for the original blur. And for whatever reason, that's an important way to work. I'm making a copy so that I'm not actually working on my original tone image, and I can always go back to it. So I'm just going to hit blur. And you can see, because it's a blur of 15, it's actually blurring quite a lot. So I'm just blurring all these little blotchy areas on her face. That's where her freckles are. And I think, you know, when I was doing this, I think my logic was, let me just see how this looks. I think it could actually look pretty cool to completely clean her skin in the tone areas and then overlay the freckles on top of a very clean skin. And then obviously I'm going to select on the arms and hands and everywhere and just get those little blurred freckles off of there. So I'm selecting, remember to always have a feather of about 10 so you don't actually see the marks where that is. Excusez-moi. And I know retouching can be a bit boring sometimes, so I thought I'd sing a song here for you guys. Okay, I'll try not to be so boring with my commentary here. So how's everybody doing? How's the quarantine doing? We're all here at the house. I'm just here blurring these different areas. It's really a lot of fun. I will say something about retouching that I think is important, is that a lot of people get hung up on their final image. They get frustrated. And okay, so what I'm doing now is with a